Okay, so in this video, I'm going to show how to correct frizzy hair on a pattern background as well as a slight background replacement here. There's enough clean background here that I think I can just pull from this one. Otherwise, I do have a pre-cleaned background that I have available just in case. So we'll see what happens, but if I need it, it's there. But if I don't have to cut them out and put in a new background, then that's always better and it saves you a ton of time. So what I'm going to do first is flesh out the rest of the background. I'm going to copy this layer, I'm sorry. And then I selected with the marquee tool this selection of the background here, and I'm going to edit and copy that, and then I'm going to paste it right back on there. So then I'm going to take my arrow tool, drag that selection over here, and kind of lay it on top. So obviously it's not completely blended. For one thing, this side's a little bit darker, so I'm going to take my burn tool here and kind of darken that down some so it matches a little better here. There we go. Oop, a little too much. Okay. And then I'm going to zoom in and grab my eraser tool and drop the opacity down to about 33-35% here. And then just kind of blend in the edges a little bit here, just so it doesn't look like it was so cut and paste. Oh, there we go. So, and then I can always go back and use my stamp tool to kind of fill in the spaces. Alright, so obviously I don't need it over her chair, so I'm going to bump up the opacity some and just kind of put that chair back in the photo. Actually, it might be easier if I just take my polygon tool and I'm going to select right around the chair here. That'll save me some time. Alright. Okay, and then turn back on that layer and hit delete. Then I'll take my blur tool here and kind of blend in the edges here so it's not quite so rough. There we go. That looks better. Cool. Okay, and then I'm gonna, let's see here, I'm gonna do layer and merge down, and then take my stamp tool here. I'm gonna change the opacity down to about 40-something%, and then again I'm gonna just kind of blend these two selections together until it looks a little more natural. Go. Getting there. Yeah. Okay. So looks a little saturated over here, just a bit. So I'm going to get my sponge tool. It's already on desaturate. And I'm going to kind of run it over that selection a little bit just to kind of tone it down. There we go. Alrighty, that looks a lot better. I am going to darken it just a bit more, especially around here and down here in the corner, since there's not much light coming in from that area. There we go. Okay, yay, looks good. So now I'm gonna copy this selection one more time, edit, copy, and paste, and then I'm going to edit and transform, flip vertical. Back to my arrow tool up here in the top left. Scooch that over. There we go. So I'm going to kind of arrow key this up a little bit. There we go. Take my blur tool and zoom in. Kind of blur that line a little bit. And then take my stamp tool. I'm going to bring down the opacity a little more, around 30 or so. Just kind of run over that line. Blend the two together. Not super hard, just keeping it look a little natural there. The reason I flipped it is because the pattern alternates. You don't want this pattern, going over to this one too, because it goes back to this little square pattern here. So now we have a completely fixed background. I'm going to merge down that little layer there, and I'm going to rename this Retouch. There we go. So yeah, now we have a fixed background. So now we need to start working on these stray hairs. I'm going to actually stay on my stamp tool and I'm going to zoom in here. And basically, especially with this background, I find a corner of a square that matches the one I'm working on. So like this one here is equal to this one over here. So I'm going to hit alternate and I'm going to start the clone stamping over here and bring it over here and then hit the corner over here as well. So you can see it's pretty darn close. I'm going to change my opacity up to 100%. And now you can see that when I'm taking out these stray hairs, it's repeating the pattern over here, which is exactly what we want. And that, especially for this particular background, is by far the most accurate and easiest way to take out stray hairs without wanting to tear your own hair out. So I'm just going to keep on going right over here till I take most of these stray hairs out. So right here I'm going to start a new selection since it's kind of vertical here. There we go. So that takes care of that square right there. And you can already see it shifts it a little bit, but when you look at the overall picture, it's incredibly close. There we go. Alright, so this one right here, I'm going to take from the bottom corner of this one over here. There we go. So I'm going to, well, that's actually not working out very well. The lighting's a little different. Let's try this one. Ooh, nope, that runs into the skin. So let's see here. Let's start from maybe this little point. As long as you can find an identifiable point to start from, then that usually will work. So I found a good one now. There we go. So now we're taking these stray hairs out. Okay, so that part's not going to work. So I'm going to pull in vertically here. There we go. It's a little better. Alright, so this starts the new background. So I'm going to pull from, let's probably this little arrow point right there. Well, no, that's not going to work. Let's see. Well, yeah, no, not quite. Okay, I need a little one. This one right here, that's what I'm looking for. There we go. Well, it's close. I'm going to just pull from the bottom here. That'll do. It does take some experimenting, that's for sure. But the result is just so much easier for you to work with than anything else. The only other way really I can suggest doing pattern background replacements is replacing the background entirely and cutting the person out. That's also an easier way to do it. But if you don't have to do a complete background replacement, then more power to you because it'll take you a lot less time. Okay, so now I'm pulling from the other edge of her head. Let's see here. So that's the circle. So I'm going to pull, and it's a pretty dark one too, so I'm going to pull from over here. There we go. That should line up. There we go. Just going to keep going. You can see the background's matching up pretty nicely here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. She's starting to get a little bit of that halo you get when you're taking away flyaway. So I'm going to decrease my brush size and get a little closer to her head. There we go. That's better. Just going to keep on going. You can see it's shifting just a little bit, but not enough to leave me concerned. We are almost done with her flyaway hairs. It looks intimidating, but it's really not if you know how to do the tricks to do it. So it took me a few tries to figure this out, but once I did, I was an extremely happy person. Okay, so there's some flyaway hairs in the chair that I'll get those in a second. Right now I'm going to kind of finish up around this edge of her head here. Kind of missed a few spots. There we go. So much better. Alright. Alrighty. Cool. Okay, I'm pretty darn happy with that. So now I'm going to kind of focus on the hairs that are in her chair here. Here's a really bright one that's in her skin. I'm going to go ahead and take that out so I don't miss it later, because that is extremely distracting. There we go. Alrighty, and then back to the chair. Get rid of all those. Thankfully there's no pattern in the chair, because that would be a little more difficult. There we go. Okay. Any little bright highlighted spots there, I'm just going to kind of get rid of. There. So there's a few stray hairs in her arm here. These are easy fixes, so I'm going to take those out. I can see a few little blemishes in her arm. Not too bad. The elbows tend to be kind of rough, so make sure you pay special attention to those. There's some hairs in her black shirt here. I'll take those out. When you start working with the pen tablet, you'll learn to become extremely quick, so I'm sorry if I am going a little fast. I'm just used to zooming right along. Again, if you hold down the space bar, that changes your cursor to a hand, and you can just move the photo around, and so you can scoot around pretty quickly there. There we go. I'm going to kind of clean up her neck and chest here. Again, if you pull laterally with the texture when you're using the patch tool, you'll get much better results rather than trying to pull from a weird direction. So I just pull towards where that same texture lies. There we go. Getting kind of rid of these big stray hairs in here. Perfect. Alrighty. And then we want to, it's a little red in there, so I'll get rid of that. So there's a lot of stray hairs in here. So what I'm going to do is pull along the line, then pull forward. There we go. So you can already see that reduced them drastically, and it still kept all that texture. I'm going to kind of get rid of her neckline here. You want to always remove necklines, because nobody likes looking at those. There we go. A few more stray hairs there. And now I'm going to go to my stamp tool with the opacity pretty much at full strength, and I'm just going to go along the edge here and kind of clean this up. There we go. It already looks a whole bunch better. I'm not removing all of the hair on her chest here because that would just look weird, but I am removing a good portion of the stray hairs. So we'll just give the image a lot more of a final look to it, a lot less messy. There. I'm going to turn my opacity down to about 34%. Again, it's not a magic number, it's just kind of in that range, anywhere between like 25 to 35% is good for smoothing. Just kind of smooth that out so it's not so choppy looking. But I'm still keeping the texture in her skin. Alrighty, so you can tell it's a huge difference. It looks much better. I'm going to go over to her arm over here. She does have a bit of flub in her armpit here, as most people tend to do. So I'm going to use my patch tool again, kind of clean that up. There we go. It's a little tricky in there. Use my stamp tool to kind of clean that up a little bit. There we go. Be kind of tight spots to get into. And then I'll use my patch tool again to bring some of that texture back. That's the only problem really with your stamp tool, is that it takes out so much of the texture. So you have to be really careful. If you do use it, go back to your patch tool and bring that texture back, because you do not want to lose it. There. Perfecto. Alright. Looks much better. Take out some of the stray hairs up here. Again, not all of them, but enough. Arm looks mostly good. One's random stray hair down here. I don't know how that got out there. There we go. Kind of a mark right there. Hand looks good, except there's one little spot there. Yeah, okay. And then there's a hair here on her pants, so I'll go ahead and get rid of that too. She's got a lot of stray hairs. Alrighty, and then I already did this arm. Cool. So now all that's left is her face. I'm going to zoom in a little more here. Get rid of all these little dimples. Make her face as even as possible. She has a pretty rough chin, so it's not the easiest. Take my stamp tool, move down to about 27% here. Kind of smooth this out. Again, you don't want to do it so much that you lose your texture. Just enough to clean that up. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Okie dokie. Move up here. She's got a pretty shiny face, so we're going to pull from the non-shiny parts that still have texture in them to make it not shiny anymore. There we go. Again, there's a lot of shine in her face here. There we are. Alright, go over this side. She has some pretty significant stray hairs on her face. So it's going to take a little bit of work here. So especially along here. Again, you don't have to get all of them, just the ones that are kind of sticking out in the way. There we go. It's pretty rough in here, so we go back with the stamp tool. There we go. Alrighty, there's a few blemishes up here too. Take care of those. And again, she's got a pretty shiny face. And there's not going to be a whole lot I can do about it on the forehead here, other than making sure she's nice and smooth. Well, there's an email. Sorry about that. Capital One. I haven't used that card in about 5 years. Alright. So now that I have all the blemishes and the hairs removed, I'm going to go back with my stamp tool, keep it at 27%, and I'm going to start smoothing that up a bit. There we go. On her, I probably am going to use the portraiture just a hair. Since her skin's a little rough around the edges. I'm going to go ahead and finish up these stray hairs real quick. She has a little bit of under eye issues, not too bad. Again, you don't want to always get rid of them completely unless requested, because you want the person to look natural. Okay, so I think that pretty much takes care of the blemishes. I'm going to go ahead and highlight her eyes real quick. Get rid of these last few dots. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to go to my dodge tool, not the burn tool, and kind of brighten up her eyes here a little bit. Not a whole lot. You don't want to blow them out or make them look weird. Just enough to highlight them and make them pop out. Yeah, looks good. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and run my portraiture tool. So I'm going to make a new layer, rename that portraiture, and then my filter, Imaginomic, and portraiture. I'm going to go ahead and looks like everything's good. Say OK. Alright, so I'm going to make a mask on that, and then Control I to invert. Take my paintbrush tool, and I'm going to paint in only the areas that I want the portraiture to show up. So kind of like, especially on her forehead up here. A little bit on her neck, not too bad. On the shoulder here. Maybe a little bit on the elbow. Nothing too extreme. You don't want to go overboard. And then I'm going to tone down the strength. So I'm going to take the opacity down until it's just a hint, but not too much. Yeah, that looks good. Okay. Alright, and then I'm going to kind of clean up this little hairline here just a bit. Just to blend that a little cleaner with my editing. There we go. Okay, so retouching is done for her. I'm going to go ahead and run my saturation action. So I've highlighted saturation. I'm going to hit play. And it didn't really change too much on here. Well, no. It also went on the wrong layer. There we go. So you can see it highlights a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and bump that up just a bit more. About 25% or so. There we go. And then I'm going to delete her out of that layer because obviously we don't want her to be saturated. Opacity needs to be 100%. And I'm going to go ahead and delete her out of there. Again, delete tool is using the feathered brush. You'll be much happier that way. And just make sure you get all the pairs. You can look over here in the preview window where it's black, and it's usually pretty telling if you miss a spot because it'll be stark white. Yeah. Just gives that background a bit of color. Alrighty. Next is Popstar. I already have that file open. I'm just going to drag that layer for our bit of contrast. Just like so. So that's a little much. The opacity default is at 20%. I'm going to bump that down to 10. Yeah, that's much better. Okay. And then I want to delete her out of that layer as well, because we do not want her to be contrasty, especially since she's wearing a black shirt. You'll lose a lot of the pattern details out of that, and that's not good. Okay, so finally I need to do my burn layer. I haven't made an action yet for the horizontal one, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to do action, new action, and I'm going to call this horizontal burn, and I'm going to hit record. So now I need to make a new layer. I'm going to rename that burn. Take my marquee tool and choose the elliptical marquee tool. Drag it edge to edge, and then select and inverse. That will turn it inside out. I'm going to choose my paintbrush, or not the paintbrush, the paint bucket tool. I have black selected. I'm going to fill that. Control D to deselect. Filter, blur, and Gaussian blur. Default setting is 247.9 pixels. I'll hit OK. Layer properties, I want to change that from normal to overlay. And then opacity, change that down to about 6 or 7%. And then I'll hit stop. And that means my horizontal burn action is now saved. So next time I need to do that step, I just highlight horizontal burn and hit play, and it just does all that for me, and it's great. So this image is now complete. Thank you very much.